What's up, everybody? It's Heat Override, and I'm ready to bring the pain for you this week. Ooh, yeah. Yo, are you ready? Are you ready for what probably is going to be the craziest episode of Bring the Pain ever? Just a little insight, just a little things. But I definitely want to get it started off because you know how we bring the pain because it's time to talk about the pizza bomber. Ooh, yeah. Woo. All right, we're going to start off with a disclaimer. All people in this document are protected. I mean, no harm to any one of them or to defile any one of them. I am simply stating my facts of meeting them through my entire life, which you will hear about as I do this podcast. I actually had the knowledge to actually run across a lot of these people, one from school, and then, of course, I will get to a lot of the other stuff. But I want everybody to understand that there is going to be some sensitive subjects talked about in this podcast. If you cannot stomach it or you cannot fathom what's about to happen, then I really cannot help you. But as a disclaimer, this opts me out of any legal actions that can go against me because honestly, there's nothing that can be done against me. It's clearly my opinion of these people with some facts that nobody knew about, and it doesn't change the outcome of the case. Therefore, it's not withholding anything, and the person that withheld everything anyway went to the dirt. So that is the way it goes, and you will hear about that as well. So I just want to get the disclaimer out of the way. I guess I wanted to start it off that way. I didn't really know how I was going to really put it together other than because my podcast itself has a disclaimer. When you click play, you agree to not only that disclaimer, but also your rights are being relinquished because you're about to hear some crazy shit, man. And I want to make sure that you understand going into this podcast that if you cannot handle what is about to be said, then maybe you need to skip to the next podcast episode. Okay, you're still here. The pizza bomber. All right, man. I mean, August 28th, 2003. I was working at Papa John's that day, actually. So I was actually delivering pizza on that day, which was the crazy part because there was some things, there was some speculations that some calls had gone into other pizza places to kind of muddle down to where it was kind of the same thing. Now, I had overheard that something up there had called, but it was not actually this call that was being placed. It was for like another business up there, a big name business, could be a store, could be a restaurant, regardless. That's what the call was made. And the order was never even placed anyway. And then, of course, when when this incident started going down, of course, this whole entire area shopping district was closed down. So we didn't take any deliveries up there in the first place. But that was wild, right? So there's your disclaimer and there's your date. I'm not going to give out any facts. And I know that some people might be coming to this podcast trying to wonder about where what facts or if there's facts behind the doors. Oh, there's facts behind the doors. It shows what kind of people these people were. And that's going to be, I will talk about that. But you watched the documentary, it went down exactly the way it did. You know, you had the death, you had the hiding of the hiding of the body in the fridge freezer. You have, of course, Margie driving down the wrong side of the highway. You have all the crazy interviews. I actually heard a story that from one of the guards that she was actually sending her underwear in the mail outside. How sick is that? I mean, ugh, jeez. Anyway, sorry if I offend you with that, but ugh. So I didn't say I was going to be nice, and this is an explicit podcast, so yuck. And so but that wasn't the case with the people. I'm not worried about the facts because everybody knows the facts. Again, this went to trial and they were all convicted. So I wanted to get that out. So Rothstein actually was a wood teacher back in the day for me and my friends, which was weird because you see him, and he was nice in school. He was always like a warm hearted guy, soft spoken, taught well. I mean, we definitely learned how to use, wood tools and build things and all that crazy stuff. So that's how I remember him. I didn't have any interaction with him after that. However, because Marjorie Deal Armstrong was a good friend of my grandmother's because they all would fish, hence why my grandmother was in the documentary. So a lot of people that may not have known, my grandmother, my mom's mom, is the white-haired lady in all the interviews. And what was crazy about that is that they didn't tell us. They didn't tell us that she was going to be on there or anything. So I was all intrigued because I've already got these little stories I'm about to tell you all intertwined with that. And then I see my grandma. I'm like, what? And mind you, she was gone. She had been gone for years. So to actually see your grandma talking, like it was messages from beyond the grave. It was just crazy, but weird, but then kind of nice. And it kind of cool to hear her laughter and everything. But it makes you wonder how much more of those tapes they have. Of course, they have the whole interview. So they didn't play the whole interview on the Pizza Bomber documentary, the evil genius. And that's just like, wow. So it's like mind blowing. So, you know, next up, Kenny Barnes. Kenny Barnes. Yeah. Okay. So he was my grandma's boyfriend for a very long time. And growing up as a little boy, I kind of just knew that that she bailed him out of jail and that, he went to jail on he was an accomplice to murder. And which that shouldn't surprise you, right? I think the dude actually has a few more bodies under his tool, and ain't nobody know about that. But from what I heard growing up, his price was $850. I guess in the 80s, that was, I guess, a lot of money. So I guess maybe that's like $2,000 now, $2,400 now. I mean, this dude's wild. But that just shows you that when you enter the worlds of drugs and mafia and all this destruction around you, you have an individual like Kenny. And Kenny, when they talked about in that documentary that Wells had gotten scared, that he was having second thoughts about doing it, and that Kenny forced him to put it on, yeah, you're right. Kenny would have fucking whooped his ass. I know that because I witnessed all the shit he used to do. When I was growing up, there was a couple times he hit my brother. He never hit me because, and again, you'll find this out over these years. This is why I wasn't associated with a lot of these people a lot of times, is because that I ran my mouth. I mean, is that any kind of like surprise for anybody? So that's why I think that in all these things that I'm about to say, I was protected. I was protected in a lot of ways. Unfortunately, my brother was not. And he chose to stay quiet, but he did speak up at times. And then a lot of this also leads to what happened with Tom and his eventual destruction, I'd say, in the end of his body, just finally giving out because he'd been through so much pain in his life. And this was emotional pain. So we were actually down at the Perry house, and Ken was working on the truck. They always had a van. And there was always this little side corner. I can see it to this day. Well, Tommy was kind of just sitting there playing. Ken just went up and slapped him out of nowhere. That just shows you what kind of sick fuck that dude was. And after he slapped him, he grabbed the grease thing and he put it on him. And I kind of was like, hey, you can't be doing that because I think he kind of just was used to doing that when I wasn't around or anybody was around. And then I'm like, hey, I'm the voice of reason here. I'm seeing this abuse go down. Now, mind you, my dad would have beat the daylights out this motherfucker. But why didn't my dad? Why didn't my dad do that? What protected these people from my dad actually doing that? We'll get to that. And that's the scary part about this is because there's actually a scary connection, but that connection has nothing to do with the actual pizza bomber case. The pizza bomber case became its own entity because they became separated from the money cows. So, when you talk about Kenny Barnes, I brought up drugs. Yes, there was lots of drugs. So previously to this attempted murder, which was a robbery, that his brother and him kind of went through. So that's a whole case you have to go back and look at. I mean, for me, I don't need to go look at it. I know what he did, and I knew the man. So I know if he's guilty or not guilty, but he served his time, right? But back then, he was also a huge, huge cocaine dealer. And he was also a huge marijuana dealer at the same time. Now, that I all knew. That I all knew. And he grew from that. He ended up becoming a crack dealer, and he was a heroin dealer as well, too. Now, this a lot of people may not know because the documentary never covered what Kenny Barnes was, which he was, you know, You had your evil genius, your mastermind with Marjorie. You had the Opie guy, which was Rothstein. You had the other guy, which was just somebody trying to help out, right? And then you had Kenny. Kenny, the true anger and hostile, and just go do it. Like I could hear his voice even to this day because I knew what he sounded like, and he sounded like a sick fuck. So I never, when we would go down and visit my grandma and he would be there, I would always actually come over to my grandpa's house. My dad's dad, my dad's mom as well, too. I would always come over here. I was like always one of the favorites. So it was, of course, when I was like, I'm going to go over where I'm going, you know? And it was just, I had to be away from that family sometimes because it just always was negativity or, you know. So my brother went fishing with all of them. So yeah, he had hands-on experience with all these people. Now, Kenny actually got my brother and my father addicted to crack about 15, 20 years ago. And that's kind of right around, that was before the pizza bomber, because right around that time is when Kenny was actually making a lot of money. But as you saw, and as they talked about on the documentary, and also as my family was cleaning out the house on Perry, is that this house was just a shitty shit house. And that he was pretty much using it for whorehaven. And at the same time, he was also getting people high as fuck doing that and selling drugs. And if you didn't pay Kenny, you definitely don't want to think about what would probably happen because he comes smack you up, right? And he wasn't really even the biggest guy. He was just so creepy and scary to some people that he actually did it. And that doesn't even extend to the far fathoms of this man. This man is an actual rapist. He is a rapist and he molested children. He is the sickest low life of scum of the earth that you could ever be. And you wonder why I would never want to be around somebody like that. And the craziest thing is that they never touched me. Is that's because I think my dad would have actually killed him. He didn't touch me. But my mouth kept me solid. And the thing is also, even my like great uncles abused my brother. When we went down and we visited down in the middle of Pennsylvania, and we went down there, we went to go rent the movie. It was Hamburger Hill. They ended up coming home with, right? Well, while we were gone, Tommy acted up. They beat the shit out of Tommy with a strap in the fucking cellar. That's the kind of sick fucks that are linked to this fucking case. Now, no, none of them had anything to do with the fucking pizza bomber, right? But at the same time, all of them had something to do with, you know, the mental abuse that they gave to my brother that led him to the drugs this sick fuck gave to him. So yeah, you could say that I have some detest. Yeah, because when I bought a house close in the area to him, he saw that we were moving in and he started coming around when I wasn't home. And immediately my wife was like, I'm creeped out. And I don't know why he stopped, but I confronted him and I say, hey, you got to stop coming over. Nobody knows you but me. And I'm not home, I'm working. And you don't need to come over my house. And he actually stopped. And after that, the next time I saw Kenny is when he was done. He was part of this pizza bomber case. So that was the whole separation. Now, my grandmother finally had enough of their shit and kind of separated from them and had been living on her own away from them with contact because, you know, I heard of a case where one time she went over to the house while it was still nasty and he was doing his thing, just to get some blankets, just because she wanted some blankets. And I'm thinking, like, what the hell? And I'm gonna tell you this too. Everything that I said about Kenny, it's 100% fact. Fact. That's why I say that he's definitely got a couple bodies on his hands, but the dude's dead. And the dude had probably nobody come to his funeral because nobody gave a shit. And that is why he is America's nightmare. He is the worst piece of shit you could be. And when he took that piece of shit, he even made it a lower piece of shit. Okay. So fuck him. And I don't give a shit. Right. So he was a pusher. And that pushing that he did made people zombies, turn my brother to hard drugs. And here, my brother was just trying to catch up with him because that's what my brother would do. Every once in a while, he would always like hit up somebody he had not hit up for 5, 10 years or something. He would just make plans with them and he would meet him out for dinner and stuff. And he would pay for it. Like nice things that Tommy did for people. And that was something that went horribly wrong. because it led him into his addiction in heroin and in meth. And eventually, that took a massive toll on my brother. But also the abuse. Nobody should be beating a 7-year-old like that with a strap. Like, fuck out of here, man. That's this kind of sick fucks that this family was. And yes, it wasn't my family, but it's indirectly that was kind of the abuse that a lot of my family has put up with all these years. It's sad. It's sad. Should I be speaking on some of it? I'm not going to speak on some of it because, again, I was more my side, my father's side. So again, they just kind of just left me alone. They let me do my thing, which is good because damn right I would have said something. You try and come after he'd override. First thing I would have said, even teachers. One time I was in ninth grade, and this fucking science teacher was just a straight dick. And he would send this dude to the office every day just based on the way he looks. He looked like a headbanger. Back in the day, long chain, baggy jeans, long hair, flannel. That's exactly what he did. So every single day, he would take roll, he would get to the guy, and then he would send him. Well, one time he sent me to the office and I was like, whatever. So he said the dude's name and then he got to me, right? And he made a comment. He goes, I thought he was like, you should be in ISS right now. I don't even know how they would even put up with you anymore. And he was like, you probably didn't even go to the office, did you? He was like, I'm going to call. I was like, hey, wasn't I at the office? And the dude was like, yeah, Rob was there, right? Because dude sends him to the office every day. He said, shut up to the kid by name, called him by his name, and I'm going to protect his name. And then he proceeded to send him to the office. That is when I actually said, I was like, you know what? Fuck that. You treat him bad every single day. And he sent him out the classroom. And when he turned around, this fat motherfucker threw a book across the freaking classroom at me. A book, like a big ass science book, threw a book at me. And he comes at me and he's like, what's that? He was just shouting everything in the world. The whole class was like, holy moly. Yo, he had overrides about to go down. Right. So I popped up real quick because I wasn't letting Fat Man get a hold of my dude. I mean, I was like 128 pounds. I was in ninth grade. I mean, I was like 13, 14 years old, right? I was walking away. I was like, shut up. I was like, the way you come at me, if my dad was here right now, he'd knock you the fuck out. And that's how I felt about that. And I think that's why it kept me a lot safe. So fuck Kenny Barnes. But man, I can't say that he has, extra bodies on his hands or anything like that. But I can say that the drugs have been there for a very long time. And that'll lead to a story later. Brian Wells. Well, here we go. First time I met Brian Wells was he probably delivered me a pizza to me and my friends because we did call Mama Mia's. He had been there for some years, but he actually started as a driver at Pizza Outlet where I was working. And it was him and a new guy. And it was just like one of those days where everybody pieced out and nobody could be around. So it was me alone as a manager, which I was fine. And I had two new drivers. So there's this other guy, he's a college kid, he's just doing this job. And we got slammed, like slammed. And I'm like, so, Brian's sitting there just making these deliveries. And he starts coming. He's like, no, no, no. And I'm like, what's up with this dude? Right now, mind you, I'm young. I'm like 20 and I don't really know I've never been around this type of person. Mind you, I played video games all my life and I've never been like this was new to me. So I'm sitting there and I'm like figuring out like, hey, what's going on? Oh, no, I gotta go get some alcohol. And I'm like, the fuck? I'm like, the hell you need alcohol when you working? Like, no. I was like, no. He's like, I got to get over to this store because they close at this time and I got to do it. I was like, look, I got all these deliveries, man. This is your job. This is what you wanted to do. He's like, fuck that. So he grabs the deliveries and goes, takes deliveries, comes back. He's just pissed. This goes on for a few processes. Finally, I get him close enough to where I think I can just handle it with the college kid. And I just sent his ass home because I ain't trying to hear some dude flipping out about alcohol. I don't know what the fuck this shit's about. Like, my dad drank alcohol growing up. My dad may have been an alcoholic at some point. Maybe one of his friends was an alcoholic at some point. I never seen this shit from them. I seen some crazy nut grabbing shit, but I seen some wild ass wrestling shit. I seen some my dad beating up naked men shit. Yeah, that happened. When I said my dad beat the shit out of people, my dad beat the shit out of people. My dad beat the hell out of a bully for me sticking up for another kid one time when the bully turned on me. And my dad seen it. And he beat the shit out of him in front of a whole school. Now, I don't condone that action. I would never do that myself. But he beat that fucking kid down and then he dragged him across the freaking playground to the principal. That kid grew up to be a menace to society. It ain't because of my dad. It's because he was a menace already. Oh, yeah. So when you're sitting there and you're sitting back and you're looking at the picture that the documentary was painting, they were painting that Brian Wells was innocent from the go. That was the problem. That's not the Wells I worked with that day. The Wells I worked with that day was a total dick. And so he comes back. And I go, look, dude, what time does this store close? He said 10. I said, I'll send you home right now. It's 9. We're good. Can you just go can you just go do a few dishes? Right. And he goes, all right. I'm like, well, dang, that was easier. He takes 2 steps around. He turns around and he goes, fuck that and fuck you. In all of my life, I got in fights when I was growing up, but as a man, I had never gotten a fight. I wanted to deck this fucker in the face. I was like, the fuck you say? I was like, get the fuck out of my restaurant. Well, I don't want to work here anyway. I was like, you're fired anyway. You're not working here. You're done. I will tell. I'm a manager. You're fucking fired, dude. And so I was supposed to take his mileage that day. I was so mad I didn't take his mileage. I paid him it. And he went on his way right back to the job that eventually got him in this pickle and to the life that he went back to. Now, my statement about Wells was not nice. It wasn't, but that was the recollection. As a manager, I had to fire him. He was completely out of line. Just like your first day at work and you act like that. So what type of person what type of person acts like that on their first day? Usually a junk ass dude. So, when you're looking back at this and you're saying like, okay, so at the pizza bomber case goes down, the unfortunately the bomb goes off and Brian does lose his life. And that is sad because I didn't wish death on him at all. And it's no ill effects. He was just an asshole and he was out of my life. So we see this all go down. And now there was all these questions. So I get home. So a lot of reporters were going around and I gave a statement to the news. They aired the news statement, which I was actually kind of thankful because when I saw the video, I could see that my knee injury had not totally healed me, which brought me back into rehab and allowed me to be able to run and kick ass now like I do. But that was the first, that interview was crazy. So that interview comes up again and has been erased from the internet. That a reporter went back on all of this and made the comment that of all the people that tried to paint an innocent light for Wells, Rob was the only one that said that he was unstable and gave a side of Wells that shows that he was uncontrollable. So I gave that statement. Now, when I gave that statement, it led to the Men in Black. Now, on a side note, with recently talking to somebody that's close to me and close to the, everything with the situation, the Men in Black actually had been visiting my family a lot because this was an ongoing case. They wanted to prosecute. They wanted to know. But the only real evidence is on top of them searching, the Rothstein property and then coming down here and searching where Barnes was, is that my family had to clean that house up. So eventually that house was sold and families moved in, bought it, has been there since. Crazy, crazy story. My brother actually went there and visited them. He told me that multiple times. It was insane. So when you look back and you see all this, I was actually sitting at home and we got a call. And I pick up the phone and it was Sally Jesse Raphael's agent. So this story came up once during a night at drinking at the bar with a bunch of my friends. And when the couple people that actually heard me take this call confirmed it, everybody was just laughing. So every once in a while when we get together, I see that person, I'll write Sally Jesse Raphael, or I'll say Sally Jesse Raphael. It gives me an idea for something. That'd be funny. Uh, and which everybody just laughs because of that night. So they called me up and they wanted to hear the story. So I gave them the story. I said, Wells was belligerent. He's trying to get alcohol the whole shift. And just as a manager, I didn't want to deal with that. I'd rather him just go buy his alcohol and go home rather than know that the way this man was acting to have alcohol while he was delivering for my store, I just knew that was a bad idea. So, and so he's talking, he's like, wow, he's like, again, here we go again. You're the only one that has a negative like story about him. I'm like, well, I don't know what everybody else's experience with the guy was, but I know what my experience with the guy was. And I was like, you could believe it or not. It doesn't really matter. And you listening or watching this podcast can believe it or not. You could do whatever you want, but I can tell you right now, that is the man I did. So the men we're eating dinner. Dinner's kind of a little theme of this because that's when the Sally Jesse Raphael call comes in. Then we're eating dinner, and the men in black show up. I'm like, okay, look, we all see the movie, right? We know they're secret agents, but come on, man. Like you really fit the cliche. You came in the black car, you had the black suits, they had the little freaking ear thing, the little twirly one too, the little cord. It wasn't a straight cord, it was a cord, it was twirly, the bloop, like a phone cord back in the day. Some of y'all know what those look like. And they came to me and they asked me. I gave them that statement, and they said they put that statement down, and they were like, "All right, yep, this is coincides." Boom, 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 and they go, "Okay, uh, we're gonna ask for you to refrain from any media coverage of this going forward." And I was like, I thought that was kind of weird. And then, of course, the witnesses there hearing this all go down because, I mean, this was huge. It was like, what the hell? These guys are actually real. And and so when I brought this up to the other person I was talking about, that's when this person told me, yeah, they are real. They were visiting, they were interviewing a lot of us because there was things going on at that house. We had to clean it up, get it ready for sale. And in this timeline too, my grandmother eventually ends up passing away. So, it's like it's this whole little crazy little thing in my head. I'm like, man, did my grandma actually put this together? But then I thought back to, my grandma, my mom, and they were actually getting along, which was really strange because my mom and my grandma had problems throughout their lives. But at the end, my mom was the one that was there for her, which was really awesome to see them mend that, to put it together, and to see my mom taking care of her. So that's when a lot of the things came down. That's when I heard about, you know, the separation from Kenny and trying to deal away. So ultimately, when my grandma stepped away from Kenny, she took the money with her. She let him have the house. She just paid the taxes and he just stayed there and squatted. And I'm not sure about the utilities. That's not my deal. That's just not me. Again, at this point in my life, I had a newborn and actually this is like 5, 6 years. Yeah. So, at that time, you know, I have like a 4 or 5 year old, and then I'm just like married. I just got married. So you're sitting here and you're looking at this whole thing go down, and I'm like, holy crap. And that's why I thought that. But I can tell you, I will reveal that stuff at the end. So my mom and everybody, that kind of is just all the side stuff. So when I was done giving my statement, they said that one of Brian's family members wanted to call and talk to me. I was like, that's strange. Okay, that's strange. So they asked me to hush. And then eventually my story that I gave the reporter was silenced. But again, there was another story that he had produced later, and I don't know the guy's name. I don't, you could, it like when I went back to find it, it was gone. And then 3 months later, 4 months later is when the documentary finally came out. So it was there for a while. And so I started talking to this family member, and this person reassured me that he was on a different path in life. Ha. Now, this is where she goes. She was on a different path of life. She confirmed that he was an alcoholic, and during those years that he had worked with me was some of the worst years of his life, and that is why he was acting that way. But we also see that he had mental problems out there too. When you learn from the documentary that he had mental problems, and that even when you read the book from the one guy that made the Pizza Bomber book and did the novel on it, he focused on his IQ at the beginning of the book. Strange, right? Said he was slightly smarter than the average guy, slightly, like that much. And so he she uh, this person said to me that, he'd been past that and did that. And that does kind of confirm it because in the documentary, we did hear that Brian had tried to turn his life around. And we heard that from, well, a woman associate that he paid money to at some point and then maybe not. So this person also said that they felt that there was no way he was in on this and that he was totally not for it. But he was. He was. You know why? Because he knew Kenny. And that means that he knew drugs. And there's no way that this other person, I bet, would have been tested. They would have been found that either they were smoking crack or they were doing heroin. Okay? Because that is the company that Kenny kept. So I'm not saying Mr. Wells was a crack fiend or that he left alcoholism and became a crack fiend or he was doing heroin, but he was definitely around the right people that did it. So a little side note, my grandma was a property manager for a long time. So she didn't work in her life. She just had money coming in. So she was kind of like, the top dog in her alley. So as far as the money that was used, Kenny took the money that he made, and that's what he would turn into drug money and then trifold that. And thus, for all those years, there's no way my grandma did not know that that was going on. So, unfortunately, again, regardless of that, in the statement that I just made, these people have been passed on. So, it doesn't matter that they were selling drugs through the 60s and 70s. And then eventually, this robbery, murder, and then he's in jail, and then she's got the money to get him out. It doesn't matter about that. What it matters is when she said goodbye, goodbye. And that is when Kenny Barnes, Marjorie Deal Armstrong, and Rothstein started all talking. And here goes what I call is the discussion at the round table. So through the years, another individual had told me this story and actually put more on it because the other storyteller of this story was my mother, and she has passed away now, of course. So she told me this that right around because we all talked when we all saw it go down and everything, and then we talked to my grandma, my mom, and my mom said, "Bobby, I got something to tell you." She goes, "I was at the table with them when they first started planning this when they first brought it up." And her boyfriend at the time, because my dad and her were separated for years, like a decade at this point. So her boyfriend, who actually used to buy from Kenny back in the 70s, that's how he knew them. He he was there too. So he is the one that told me this story after my mom passed. Just over some beers at a bar. We sat there and the same witness that has saw the men in black, witnessed the phone call from the family member, is there again for this as well too. And so you're looking at the whole picture now. And they said that they started saying that they needed money and that they were desperate. And they were kind of just hanging out all as friends, but at the same time, my mom got pissed. She goes, "Look, all of you are fucking crazy." Because this comes from my mom. This is what she told me. And that she looked at her boyfriend and she says, "Let's get the fuck out of here." She was like, and she turned around, she said, "Never contact me again." And I'm pretty sure there was never contact again between, Rothstein, Marjorie, and Kenny. So Kenny already lost at this point. My grandma's gone. His money's gone. He doesn't have any links. My brother's not doing crack anymore. They've got nothing. They got nothing. They got no money. They have everything's going wrong. Right. And this is around this time period is when he was coming to my house as well, too, which is why I scared him away. And it was a good thing I scared him away because I wasn't going to, once I saw that thing in the addiction my brother went through and all that, I couldn't associate myself with that. That's just what I do in life. If you're not important to me, I don't need I'm not going to make time for you. Just stay away. I don't know you. Hey, just keep it that way. Right. So that's my recollection and everything. So you hear about the story, and that story has never been told until now. Nobody knew. Of course, everybody thought that there was plotting and planning before that. This was the first sign. Now, if my mom would have went to the police a little early, she would have been able to maybe, get these people under a target a lot faster, maybe got them watched. Now, you can't say my mom made the right or wrong decision. At that same time, when you enter the world of drugs and you know that this has been practically the money cow for these people, on top of hanging out and catching fish or whatever, not going bowling, you sit back and you look at it, and then that's when I see my grandma laughing in that in the documentary. I'm like, man, it's like that's what it was like. Did she do it? But then at the end of that documentary and everything that I figured out, I knew she didn't. I knew that if she wouldn't have been around my mom, there could have been a possibility. But because my mom was around her and that my mom was kind of just, they had mended bridges, it showed that my grandma was definitely on a mending way of life. She had taken a new step in life. I remember the quote she told me. She goes, Bobby, always try to make sure you always stop and smell the flowers by the side of the road. Because even if you drive that same road every day, those flowers may not be there one day. So, thanks, Grandma. So, that really makes me think that, and for years, that was something that I always thought about that was like, damn, was my family part of this? Did my family like put this all together? Was this orchestrated? But no, it was the evil genius. It was Marjorie. It was her desperate life. And the desperation from Kenny and them all being friends all became this huge, huge thing. And then it became the evil genius. That's my synopsis on this whole thing, is that my stories, my recollection shows that, Wells was a shitty person. Was he getting better? Yes, he was. But did he keep bad company? Yes. When they talk about him putting that collar bomb on and Kenny going up to him, yes, Kenny would have beat him. It maybe have killed him. He probably would have killed him, right? Because that's just kind of that person is. Again, Kenny Scum. Like, maybe okay, I will say this. He never touched me in any way, shape, or form. So maybe out of respect, I should show him a little more respect. But I can't show a monster like that any kind of respect because he's scum of the earth. Come on. Oh, yeah. So, when you talk about that, the whole roundtable talk, you talk about the strange cover up, you talk about that my story made it all the way to Sally Jesse Raphael, and you see that the way that they painted Wells, was he truly innocent? I say no, because again, you are guilty by association. You put yourself in that situation. If he indeed backed out, wanted to back out at the end, again, Kenny would have made him do it. Kenny would have, and that's just what was going to happen. And he was going to fulfill his part of the bargain, or he was going to have to deal with his drug dealer. And that's a huge pill to swallow. You take this man that has molested people, abused people, has sold them drugs that probably killed some of these people. Again, there's somebody fucks up somewhere and has a bad overdose. That's on his hands. But guess what? It ain't on his hands. He didn't give a shit, and that comes back to the whole thing, this whole crazy case, the whole just like, how's that even happen? And again, I thought it was just Kenny, but just seeing my grandma on that documentary was nuts, right? So, any comments can be taken. If you want to talk about this on your podcast and some of the other things, talk about the round table, maybe talk about the drug ring that these people had back in the day. And I'm not saying Margie was part of that drug ring, but if you knew a drug dealer, you did a drug, you most likely did the drugs that the drug dealer sold. And Kenny had been selling crack, cocaine, marijuana all his life. So, and being a strong arm for the people. And this goes back to Erie's ties with the mafia. You know, there is an Italian side of my family, and he was living in that. There was connections, and that man's part of that connection. Not saying he was Italian, but just saying that that's where he came from. And that's what happens in this life. That sometimes when you look at the gray area, there's just darkness. And there was darkness in that guy. And that fueled Marjorie, Rothstein, everybody else in this case. It fueled them. And with that, they made one of the most bizarre cases ever, the pizza bomber. All right, everybody. I hope all of you enjoyed that. I hope it gave you a little lessons. I hope if you go fact check this thing, you can go ahead, go fact check it. It's all there. It's all, and maybe you find my statement. If you find my statement, can you post me to it? I want to read it again. I want to give that reporter props because he believed in me and he believed my story, which was true, which is documented because of course he was fired and everything is there. It was all crazy. And just to have contacts to all these people working one day, firing wells, wood teacher. I remember the first time Marjorie treated me with respect too. I remember the one time she was sitting on the Perry Street house over here, right? And I was like, she was like, hey, I was like, and I was a nice boy. I was like, hi, I'm Bobby. And she goes, I know who you are. She was like, I hear a lot about you. So the good that she heard about me was probably good, of course, because I was, like I said, I was just that happy little boy, like just in that little bubble, played video games and that's been my life. And that's why my life was thankful. And unfortunately, that's what makes me sad about my brother because my brother lived the same life, but they got to him. So, rest in peace him as well, too, because God, man, that man did a lot. And that's why that man was my protector for years. But I hope everybody has a good time. Again, disclaimer, I know there was a lot of things talked about on this episode that is it's graphic. It's just kind of just there. I tried to protect most of the story as well as I could from the people in it because I don't mean any ill effects towards any of these people. It's sad that everything happened, but again, things happen with bad people around you, and they always say peer pressure, you know, you're only as good as the company you keep. The list goes on. Have a great day, everybody. And always remember to bring the pain. Ooh, yeah.